Hello and welcome to Indie Business Radio for Monday, November 10th, 2008. I'm your host, Donna Maria, and you have arrived at the one place where we empower you to enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way. Today's media partner is OnlineLabels.com, where you get over 130 label sizes in more than 30 different materials for your laser or inkjet printers. Don't pay more than you have to for your labels. Start slashing your label and shipping costs today. With OnlineLabels.com, it's as easy as click, print, stick. Well, there's no shortage of opinions about business planning these days. It seems like the last few years have seen a deluge of new business startup and planning books and opportunities and suggestions and websites and blogs and magazines and newspapers and articles, but nothing really takes quite the position that today's guest does. He's business planning expert Tim Berry. Tim Berry is the founder and president of Palo Alto Software, the manufacturer of Business Plan Pro, the country's best-selling business plan software, of which he is the principal author. He's also written 3 other books on business planning and is a popular blogger and speaker on the topic of business plans. And I'm holding 2 of his books in my hands right now, and they are fantastic. One is 3 Weeks to Startup, a high-speed guide to starting a business. And the second, and my personal favorite, although they're both good, is the Plan As You Go Business Plan. Tim Berry, welcome to Indie Business Radio.
Oh, thank you. Donna Maria, I'm very happy to be with you today.
Do join us, all you indies out there. The phone number is 800-773-0355. Now, Tim, you're a software writer. You're the principal author of this software. Tell me a little bit about what it's like to be a software developer that develops products for small business owners. How did you get into that?
Oh, that was a long path, really. I grew up somewhere around the age of 30. Before I grew up, I had been married. Let's put it this way. By the time I grew up, I had already been married for 10 years, and I'll add that we're still married. It's been 38 years now. I had 3 kids, but I had spent a decade in Mexico City as a journalist, writing for UPI first, then Business Week and Financial Times, and a lot of writing that started out as basic journalism and then went into business writing, and led me to decide at the age of 31 that I wanted to know what the hell I was talking about.
Okay.
So I went back to school. I'd had a degree in literature and a master's in journalism and 10 years writing out of Mexico City, but at that point, with my wife and 3 kids, we returned from Mexico City to the United States, and I enrolled at Stanford, where I ended up getting an MBA and discovering software, which goes back to your question, discovering that you can't really describe what a business is going to do without dealing with both words and numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me into programming because numbers are essential, and the way to manage the numbers made me discover, I was an ex-hippie literature guy, but I discovered computers and computer programming and found that that really works to help make things easier. So it was following the path towards doing it better, really, that got me into programming. Although I will say, before I go on, I did about a third of the code in the original Business Plan Pro from 1994. These days, we have a team of 12 full-time people year-round working on that. Product's in its 11th version now, and it's no longer my programming. It's still a lot of my methodology and concepts, but I'm not a programmer anymore.
Mm-hmm. So, Tim, in terms of, you were a programmer, you made this great software, so you probably worked with tons and tons of small business owners over the years. Tell me, what did you notice about what they were doing, what questions they were asking that led you to believe that this particular book, the Plan As You Go Business Plan, was something that would be helpful?
Oh, I became almost angry, actually, to tell you the truth, at the widespread myth or misconception somehow that it's a business plan, as if it were some single thing, single event, a document. It's a business plan, and then the world would decide whether a small business needed a plan or didn't need a plan, and you plan to start a business, but if you're running a business, you don't need a plan. And the anger was that what really works is planning. And planning is something that will steer your business and is a long-term project and leads me to some surprises like a good business plan is never done and your business plan is always wrong, which is why I got into this. Plan as you go is, in a way, getting back to the fundamentals that we're all managing change. And if we think of the business plan as this one-time thing, this document coil-bound at Kinko's of 35 pages or whatever it is, it gets in the way of the business planning, which I regret. I think that's a dangerous misconception that hurts people, and that's what led to the title and the approach of that last book.
So, Tim, you found that people were buying your software and reading your articles and I guess buying other books as well, but they were looking at the business plan as an end in and of itself.
Yes, exactly. And that's a way.
The magic door was supposed to open once their business plan was done.
Exactly. And then the business plans would get dusty off in a drawer somewhere, and I see that as a huge waste of what can be a steering wheel in a business. You know, the right. Planning is a process that helps us keep our long-term directions in mind while we deal with short-term tactics and changes and the whole rest of it.
Right, and fires and emergencies too.
Yeah.
Tim, you know, let's divide it up maybe into two sections. There are different reasons why people prepare business planning documents, and let's talk first and really briefly about business planning for the purpose of obtaining funding. Are there differences between the business planning process when that's your goal, or at least your initial goal, and planning when you're not looking for outside funding, when you're going to be bootstrapping your venture?
Definitely. And I think it's important to separate the planning that ought to be helping your business forever from the output.
Okay.
And there are various outputs. One of them is the formal business plan document, the one that I like to think of as produced at Kinko's coil-bound, and I mean, or whatever your favorite copy shop is. I have no special relationship with Kinko's, but there's one output, the formal business plan document. That's just one of several. Another output is the 60-second description of your business that you give to the person in the seat next to you on the airplane.
Right.
Or the elevator speech. Another output of your plan is the pitch presentation that you might be giving to a banker or an investor if you're in that. So, and then the summary memo. There are a lot of different things that come out of the plan. But for me, the plan stays alive on your computer always. And these different outputs happen when they're needed.
And so most of our listeners here on Indie Business Radio are not looking for funding, and these days I guess even if they were, they may not get it. But I guess that maybe that's not 100% true, but it is a little bit more difficult these days.
Yeah, certainly harder now than 6 months ago, yeah.
Exactly. But most of them, in any way, no matter what funding may or may not be available, they really value the kind of independence that allows them to grow their business at a rate that also allows them to enjoy their lives as the process is moving forward. So when someone is in that position, Tim, what are some of the first things you tell them to do? I mean, I know it all starts with an idea, but ideas can be overrated, right?
Well, ideas, absolutely. Ideas are essentially valueless. It's the opportunity that matters, and it's the work that makes the idea come into existence as something that people do or buy.
Is that really the difference between a business that gets to liftoff and a business that doesn't? It's not necessarily that the idea was better, it's that somebody actually made it happen.
Oh yeah, ideas are a dime a dozen. There's every good idea any one of us has ever had, 1,000 other people or maybe 1 million other people have had it at the same time. Ideas transmit through the air. It's just ideas are like shared humanity or something. They're all over the place. But you or me grab that idea and you figure out how to get a location, how to get the people together, where the money's coming from, what you're going to do specifically, and you build a business, and that's what the real opportunity. I mean, specific example, because this, I could sound very theoretical, but here's an example. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in the late 70s used to go over to Stanford campus. Every Thursday night there was a computer club that met in the basement at Stanford, and 50 or 100 people every week, all they talked about was, gee, there ought to be a personal computer manufacturer, talking about 76, 77, around then. Mm-hmm. Ironically, there was Altair and MIPS. They actually had already started. So these two Steves, they didn't have the original idea that was Apple Computer. They took an idea that a lot of people had, right, and they built a company. They figured out how to manufacture and do the drawings and get somebody named Markula who could sell, and somebody named Regis McKenna who could do marketing, and somebody Kleiner Perkins to give them some money. So they took the idea and made a business, and that's what matters. That's where the value is.
So what are some of your recommendations for some people who may be listening and they have a really good idea, or not only do they have an idea, but they've actually gotten a little bit along with it? Maybe they have a website and they've gotten some products together and a few photos at the website, and they're like, okay, this is great. But so often I talk with people and they're like, this is so wonderful, I'm having so much fun. Now what do I do?
Yeah, there's where we get into the heart of it, isn't it? The first thing I recommend to those people is clean your mind of the mistaken idea that a business plan is a document that has some formal menu-like, recipe-like contents. Just get that out of your mind. A business plan is going to be the first step of business planning, and it's going to be helping you move forward in the right way. So that's number one. It might never get off your computer until you get a business plan event. And then I'll say, start anywhere. Get going with this business planning and look in the mirror. Who are you? What do you like to do in terms of when you think of your business? Some people will write mission statements. Some people will do sales forecasts. Some people will list startup costs. Some people will go back in the web and make the web product better. It doesn't matter. If you just get going, what you're aiming for in your business planning is setting down some things that you can start reviewing so that you create this planning process that steers your business towards where you want to go.
So in that process, again, it doesn't have to be formal. My first business plan was really not a plan. When I look back on it, it really was a plan, but it was a set of ideas that I actually jotted down on the proverbial restaurant paper napkin and presented it to somebody who sort of said, that looks like a pretty good idea. Why don't you flesh that out a little bit?
Exactly. See, and that's where the misconception gets in the way, because that's what most of us ought to be doing, whether or not we have the business plan event. Now, in my world, I talk about a business plan event is that scary moment when you have to produce a document for some third party, the investor or the banker. But the vast majority of the world that's running small businesses doesn't have that event. So okay, let's go back to your napkin. I say first heart of the plan, and then flesh and bones. And those two things really, however you manage to just keep that ball rolling, the flesh and the bones, Donna Maria, you just sort of made reference to what I call the flesh and bones. What's going to happen when? Who's going to do it? How much is it going to cost? How much it's going to bring in? There are a certain number of things that, and again, it can stay on your computer, but the what's going to happen when, milestones, date, deadlines, that sort of stuff is very useful.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I know your software is really great, but even before someone gets to that, a lot of that can be actually put down in a table or a pie chart almost, just at least to just conceptualize it. So this is really good, Tim, to kind of take a little bit of the fear. I think I talk with a lot of people who are like, well, I want to have a business, but I don't have a business plan yet. And I don't know exactly what they mean, and what you're saying is that if they're focusing on the document, then that's going to hold them up even more.
Yeah, and they may not. I mean, what they mean is going to be different for every business, but here's sort of how to get at the core of it. When you start putting down the flesh and bones of the plan, and we want to get to the heart of the plan in a few minutes, but let's stick with the flesh and bones. Mm-hmm. When you start putting them down in a computer or on a napkin or on paper, what you do is you start building for yourself the steering mechanism that you'll have a month later when you start comparing, well, here's what I thought and here's what happened.
Right, right.
And that's steering. We want to keep the plan in our head. Most of us like what we do, and it's exciting to do the indie idea, so we want to keep it in our head. What I've discovered is I lie to myself, and I think most of us lie to ourselves. I know I do. If I keep it in my head, time goes by, and I start fuzzing up, I knew that. Oh, I thought that was going to happen, and I lose the opportunity to keep track of here's what I thought would happen and here's what actually did happen, which gives me the opportunity to manage better. Here's how my assumptions have changed. And if you don't write them down, maybe it's just me, but I suspect my brain works like most human brains. I just get fuzzy over time with what my assumptions really were 6 months ago. But if I write them down, and I don't mean formally produce a business plan like people fear necessarily, I mean write down what's going to happen and when, and the use of that is so you can go back and look and say, oh, yeah, well, I assumed, but then this happened, so therefore, and then you start to get management. It's this process of review that actually drives the management, but if you don't write it down somewhere, you're going to lose it. You know, you don't keep it in your head. Your head plays tricks on you.
And we're going to come back after a short break and talk more with Tim Berry, the author of the Plan As You Go business plan. Tim, I don't think your head is any different from most people's. We lie to ourselves about business all the time. But we're going to come back and we're going to talk with you more about how we can avoid that problem. This is Indie Business Radio. We'll be right back.
Why is everyone listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com? Because it's the future of talk radio. Every day, more and more people are finding Internet radio as not just an alternative media, but as a replacement to traditional AM and FM broadcast stations. Internet radio offers a wider variety of programs, convenient on-demand listening that meets your schedule, and fewer commercial interruptions. And GlobalTalkRadio.com is already leading the way by matching this content with a highly targeted Internet audience. GlobalTalkRadio.com offers its listeners one of the widest programming varieties on the Internet, from business and finance to self-improvement, paranormal, health, literature, romance, politics, and more. There are also opportunities for prospective hosts who would like to host their own weekly or one-time talk shows. Want to learn more? Check us out at www.globaltalkradio.com and see the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back to Indie Business Radio. I'm talking today with my guest, Tim Berry, the founder and president of Palo Alto Software, and also the owner of the Plan As You Go business plan. And before we took our break, Tim was giving us a really great overview of a mindset that we need to have in order to tackle this business planning process so that we can lead our businesses instead of focusing on, what it is to have a quote-unquote business plan. So, Tim, tell me a little bit about your experience. You've been in this industry, business planning industry, for a long time. Have you noticed any differences between the way business planning functions practically today and the way it did, say, 10 years ago?
I think I have, actually. It's hard because the real core of it, the process, the fundamentals are the same, but there was a time when the business plan per se might have been overvalued, too formal, and a little less fluid than it should be. There is sort of a general reassessment these days about how the pace of change and the relationship between the plan and the planning and the management. I think we're moving in the right direction in the world of entrepreneurship, in that we're more sensitive to the idea that a plan should be flexible and should be managed and shouldn't be just in the drawer. I think that's improvement over time, actually, but maybe it's just that we're more aware of what seems to be the quickening pace of change.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I used to work at a law firm for an attorney. I was one of the associate attorneys there, and he would get these business plans all the time from all across the country from people who wanted, in exchange for a share, they wanted him to provide them with some legal services, and they just piled up in a corner, and every now and then we would all pick them up and look through them and give him ones that we thought had some promise. And I remember by the time he would pick a few that he was interested in, everything had changed.
Oh, yeah.
And this would sometimes be, within 3 or 4 weeks of getting the business plan. So it really has, and today, Tim, of course, you and I can have an idea right now and have it marketed on the Internet in about 2 hours.
Yeah, it's fabulous. This is a wonderful world to be in, and I think the planning becomes much more important, but only if we recognize that it's about managing change. And we got to lose another one of these myths that hurts people, is the idea that somehow what business planning is we say today on November 10th of 2008 what's going to be happening next July and August and September. And somehow next July and August and September we're supposed to be doing what we said we were going to do the previous November, as if there was some virtue in that. Sticking to the plan is good. Well, yeah, but the plan changes because the assumptions change. Oh, I do think the world recognizes that more now than, when I started with business planning, it was 1974.
Yes, it is a totally different world. Tim, do you find that people, when they do kind of loosen up on some of the stringent things they expect a business plan to be and just kind of start doing things with sort of the skeleton in mind, taking small steps forward, do you find that opportunities and potential business persons come along and actually almost require that you change the business plan?
Well, yes. Actually, I think that whether or not they're managing their plan and keeping it alive, business changes come, and our new landscape, the way technology allows us to connect together, is going to continue to accelerate change. So, in a way, it's keep your plan alive or be lost in the past. Things change very quickly, and the planning is a way to connect. See, I have two metaphors that I like to use that sort of help to bring this into perspective for me. The first is dribbling.
Dribbling.
So,
As in basketball?
Well, in my case, I coached soccer for my kids, and then they went on and played in high school. The older ones coached for the little. So I got a lot of soccer in my background, and dribbling for other people in basketball. In both cases, it's the same idea, though, because as you get the ball at your end of the court, heading towards the other end of the field, if a team is well coached and a player is well coached and they know what's going on, there's always an unspoken plan.
Mm-hmm.
In soccer, it was usually we'll take it up the side and then center it over to the middle and whatever. But I like the metaphor because in dribbling, the plan changes fast as the opponents move. The specifics of the plan, it's still, we want to get over to the other end and score a goal or score a basket. But the specifics adapt themselves to the change. But there is still a plan that needs to be revised, and people need to have the context of the plan to manage the specific changes. So that, to me, is a metaphor for the planning the way we need it. We all need to define success long term. Success is not easy to define. My success might have been building a business but still being able to coach soccer for 8 years for various kids. Somebody else's success is being valued at $10 billion when Microsoft buys 2% of your business. Success is different for different people. If we don't keep the long-term goals in mind, how then do we manage the short term and the immediate, the fires to put out? And we have to manage both short and long term if we're going to move slowly and steadily towards the horizon that we define as success. And that's planning.
Tim, what are your top 3 most important critical qualities of that flexible business plan that gets us from point A to wherever that success is, how we define it? What are your 3 most critical qualities of a plan that does that?
The first thing I say to people surprises a lot of people. The first thing you do if you're going to, believe me, say, and as we finish up in a few minutes, go off and start your planning, the first thing to do is set your review schedule. Absolutely essential. Do not get lost in the idea that it's a plan, and when you've finished developing it, you've done something. You set your review schedule. So Palo Alto Software has been around since 1988. As we've grown from 0 to 40-some people, we always have the third Thursday of every month. We bring in lunch, we get together, and we review our plan versus actual. That's what I'm talking about. Number 1, set your review schedule. When am I going to look at my plan?
And is this generally about holding yourself accountable?
Yes.
Before you even start anything, you have dates in mind when you're going to sit down and say, have I made any progress, or am I still sitting here thinking about my idea?
And the value of it, you're right exactly, yes. That's it. The value of it is going to start showing up with the regular review.
Right.
So that's number 1.
Okay.
Number 2 is keep your assumptions on top. We forget what our assumptions were so often that then we start managing the surface stuff without realizing that the in-depth assumptions have changed. We have to keep the assumptions top of mind. So we list them. As we do our regularly scheduled planning process, we list what are we assuming so that when we go back and review, we can look first at the assumptions. It's crazy how often we do that.
Give us an example of that. Would this be, I know there's a million examples, but the Indie Business Radio listeners, a lot of them are cosmetics manufacturers. So is an example of that, we're going to do 3 trade shows next year, and each one is going to result in a certain number of new wholesale customers. Is that a basic example of what you mean?
That could be, yes. And in that example, what you'd have to do is remember that you're making assumptions about which trade shows matter and how much each of them costs, and as things change, in the trade show context, we used to do Comdex years ago, and then Comdex closed, became inefficient, and just was no longer. I have sort of a personal one that's just such a great example of how you have to review assumptions, and this will be quick, but we were going up to Portland from Eugene, where I live, to Portland is a couple hours. We were going up to Portland on December 11th for one thing, and it was going to be useful because another thing was going to happen December 12th and a third thing December 13th.
Mm-hmm.
We had it all set up, and then it turns out the December 12th thing wasn't going to happen. So here we are with December 11th and December 13th, but now the business value of it compared to the cost changes, and you have to go back and say, yeah, December 12th or December 11th and December 13th made sense when it was part of a program with the 12th, and then the costs and the upheaval made sense. Now they don't. We were actually talking about going up the 11th, back the 12th, back the 13th. Somebody said, wait a minute, the whole thing doesn't hold together anymore. Check your assumptions, and you just forget. You forget that. Wait a minute.
If you've written them down, it's less of a fire to put out, right? Because you can quickly go back and see what assumption you made, what result you thought you were going to get from that you can't get anymore, and you can make an adjustment.
Exactly, and it's this review process and writing them down, because otherwise it just slides through. This is where we're dealing with what it is to be human. If you don't give yourself the crutch, if we're geniuses, we could do it, but I'm not. I need the crutch of having it written down. When I say written down, it's in my computer. We very rarely. I've had the same business plan for 23 years now. Just like the farmer has the same axe, and he's changed the handle 12 times and the blade 13 times, but it's the same axe. It's,
right.
Right. If you don't write these things down, then when you review them, you miss them. And assumptions are easy to forget. We were assuming our sale. I mean, here's a classic example right now in the middle of this liquidity crisis, financial crash, whatever we call it right now. A lot of people are going to have to go back and look at sales forecasts and say, well, yeah, but we were assuming people could get bank loans, and now they can't, so we have to revise the sales forecast. Right.
Yeah, that's a big one. I'm glad you mentioned that because have you seen it, impact people in that way, and how are they adjusting? Are there some tips you can offer in our final 2 minutes of this segment?
Yes, and the key is to go back and look at your plan and recognize where the assumptions have changed, because it's hard to make generalizations for every business, but number one, are you in a segment where restricted economics might hurt you? Number two, is your cash flow still flowing? These are going back to your plan things that you do. And number three, what exactly are the adjustments that make sense for you when you've gone through 1 and 2? Some businesses are getting better.
Right. Well, and it's the ones I've talked to, at least, and maybe you as well, you can tell me, have been the ones who do have something that they can look at and say, okay, here's where we can cut some fat. Here's some assumptions we made that we can adjust and still maintain a profit level.
Well, and there's fun stories too. I know somebody who's doing email marketing who's suddenly trying to figure out how to deal with the extra demand for her services.
Right.
People are suddenly, oh my God, I have to generate more sales. So it's a case by case, but if you've done the planning, you have something to go back and look at so you can piece out the details.
Okay. You know where to adjust and how you're going to change your actions to coincide with what your needs are.
Yep.
Well, we're going to take our final break and come back and talk more with my guest, Tim Berry, author of the Plan As You Go business plan. Don't touch that mouse. We'll be right back.
Want to stay on top of what's new in the radio industry? Sign up for a free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio, available exclusively to listeners of globaltalkradio.com, and find out what's new in the world of online radio. Listeners can find out about new shows and special guests. People with something special to offer can find out how to become a guest and how to prepare for an interview. And prospective hosts will find a valuable resource for everything from planning a new program to selecting topics and guests, recouping expenses by selling advertising, and more. Sign up today for your free subscription to the Future of Talk Radio by visiting www.globaltalkradio.com and learn about the future of talk radio today.
Welcome back for our final segment of Indie Business Radio. I want to tell you guys, before we pick up with my guest Tim Berry, I want to invite you to our website at themediaisyou.com, where Indie Business Media is doing some media training for small business owners. We are going to help you use technology, the power of your voice, the power of your video camera, the power of social networking, and all the technological tools that are free or very low cost to help you be your own media outlet and promote your own business and use those promotional tools to take it viral so that people are reading about you, watching your videos, listening to your podcast while you're doing something else. Visit www.themediaisyou.com to register and get more information. So, Tim, in our second segment, you shared with us two of the three things that need to definitely be done, the top most critical things about that business planning process. The first is have a review schedule in place. The second is to stay on top of your assumptions. What's the third critical thing, Tim?
The third, Donna Maria, is metrics.
Metrics.
Metrics is different for different businesses, but it starts with your basic numbers like sales, costs, and expenses. And if you can, look at other metrics: calls made, presentations made, calls received, emails in, emails out. Every business is different, but the reason you want metrics is you want to be able to, as you work with your plan, you want to be able to go back and look and see whether or not you've been on track. You know, there's the question, well, are you following your plan, followed by the question, well, how would I know?
Right,
so
right.
You can't stay too blue sky strategic if you're going to be working with real planning. Put some metrics in that plan for yourself, so that will help you know where you thought you were going to be and where you are, and it just generates management. It generates steering. So that's definitely my number 3, concrete, specific stuff that you can measure later.
Specific numbers. And is this where having some business planning software comes in?
The business planning software, now, obviously, I'm biased because I really love the stuff that I've been involved with. The business planning software is a tool to make the mechanics easier for you to manage. It just, so you worry about the content. Yes, the business planning software, well, I'm talking about Business Plan Pro and Palo Alto Software. It will, among other things, give you standard, financially correct, and mathematically correct financials with your own numbers and your own assumptions, guiding you through how to put those assumptions in. And if you're selling on credit this much per month and your customers change, they used to pay you in 45 days, but now they pay you 90 days, here's how much more money you're going to need from the bank, and things like that.
And this is all done in a spreadsheet format so that you really, you don't have to be an expert with numbers to make this work, right?
Entirely. There's an interface around this that is basically my life's work is trying to explain, because if you're smart enough to run a business, you can use these tools to help lay things out so you get more visibility and you see what's coming a little bit easier. It's not magic. It doesn't do it for you. It just helps you lay your assumptions into the right place so that mathematically here's what happens. And this waiting longer to get paid is a perfect example. You just go in there and you change your 45-day assumption to 90-day assumption, and when you press enter, it's, oh my God, here's what it does to my cash flow.
That's great.
There's a lot of mechanics that the software can help with. There's no artificial intelligence. It doesn't do your thinking. It
does save you time. It saves time and helps to alleviate some of the angst. So, especially where the metrics are concerned, because that's where I find most people, myself included, have the most struggle. Is with those numbers.
There's this another of these great myths is the sort of you're not qualified myth in business planning, that somehow if you don't have the CPA or the MBA or the degree in statistics or econometrics that you're not supposed to be planning. And a lot of the way financials work is mathematical and mechanical, and software can pull you through that. So it breaks it down into the assumptions, and if it's true that you're going to spend this much per month on rent and that much for payroll, and your sales are that many units at that many price, there's a lot of mechanical things that software can help with.
Right, that's good. So we've got our critical math. Make sure you do these things at least on the front end. Have a review schedule in place. Make sure you have assumptions and review them regularly. Stay on top of them. And also make sure that you have some sort of way to keep track of the financials, especially when they change from time to time based on different external factors and your customers. So now, what are some of the things on the opposite end of that spectrum, Tim, that you see small business owners do that essentially, just wipe out anything positive they might do? What do we need to avoid doing?
One of the first things that comes up, I think, just talking about errors that I see a lot of, is getting caught in the old-fashioned idea that lower price means higher volume. That comes up a whole lot. I read hundreds of business plans. I judge venture competitions. I teach one course a year in spring quarter. I'm a score counselor. I see hundreds of business plans, and it just, I hate it when people are assuming that as they do something new, somehow they have to have a lower price than what's out there.
Even when it's lower than will sustain the business, you see people doing that?
I just see that there's just so much waste and loss in this idea that your price has to be lower, and we do it by sort of muscle memory. Somewhere back in microeconomics, people said that, the lower the price, the higher the units. But back then, it was Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, and he was talking about lumps of coal. Mm-hmm. So, it doesn't apply anymore, and I see these entrepreneurs struggling to keep the price low on their services or low on the restaurant or low on the consulting, and what they're doing is really hitting their value proposition very hard. People, the first message you give to somebody about the value of what you're selling is you assign a value with a price. And low price is great for Walmart, but Walmart is hugely capitalized. Low price is hard for most entrepreneurs in small businesses to sustain. So that's number one.
Yeah, and not only that, though, but I do see, business books within the last 2 or 3 years that say, you have to offer quality and you have to do it at a lower price.
And it's that comes along. I will never forget, and this was 20-some years ago now, but it was like getting kicked in the stomach when my favorite client at Apple Computer canceled my newsletter contract and hired a different vendor that was charging 3 times as much, and he took me to lunch to tell me about this. And it was a kick in the stomach because he said, Tim, your stuff was better. You know it, and I know it. But we had to go to the high-price vendor because they're telling me we have to spend more on marketing, and they're just saying if they charge 3 times as much, they must be 3 times better. And I lost the damn contract.
Right.
Well, okay. Fool me once, and it's your fault, but I'm not going to do that again. It's a very good lesson. And this man remains a friend today. That was 20 years ago, and we still talk about it. They told him, his bosses told him, no, hire the more expensive one.
So does it in some ways boil down to pricing your products as high as you can?
No, it's about
be able to pass the red face test.
No, it's about accurate value. It's about giving something that you believe in. That's what really makes it. You price it the way you believe that it's right, but you have to believe what you're doing.
Accurate value. That's a really good way to say it, and that's an example of what you said earlier, which is the business planning software can only take you so far.
Yeah. You give people value. But let's talk about a second mistake, because time will run out, and this is so important. People think in profits, but they spend in cash. Cash flow is different from profits. Profits are an accounting thing. They can be fictional. I can have sales, huge sales, for which I haven't received the money yet because the distributors will pay me 5 months later. And that makes me profitable. But if I don't have money in the bank, I'm not paying my people, I'm not paying my vendors. And here's an interesting statistic. I saw a study that the SBA published in the middle 90s. 43% of the businesses that they studied that went under were profitable when they went broke.
Wow.
So that's number 2. Manage your cash, not just your profits. Profits are good, and I'm not saying be unprofitable, but don't think profits alone are enough to sustain a business. You have to have money in the bank to meet your payroll and pay your vendors.
Right. And some people do feel, sort of, as you said earlier, about lying to yourself about I'm making money as opposed to making a profit.
Oh, all over the place, yeah. Donna Maria, just think about in our audience today, how many people underpay themselves and pretend that their business is successful, and they're really driving themselves into the ground and getting old with it, and they're not paying themselves, which, I did. I built a business. I didn't pay myself for more than a year at one point, but at least I knew what I was doing, and I wasn't lying to myself, you know.
Mm-hmm.
See it for what it is.
That's awesome. What's the third mistake?
Oh, I just jumped the gun on that. That sweat equity deal. That somehow you hide your costs and feel better about it. The third mistake is not paying yourself.
Okay, let's talk about that. I like the sound of that. And what do you exactly mean by that? Because some people think, it means, every Friday I write myself a check and then I pay my mortgage and all that other stuff. That's not all that you mean, is it?
No, I'm talking about so that you actually see your business as it progresses. I come to a very specific thing that I deal with in business plans that I read and when I teach and so on. When you have your payroll, even as a one-person business, put in your costs what you're worth. And if on the short term you can't cover what you're worth, then show a loss.
Right.
Show it in your business financials. Now, I'm not, a business plan is different from your tax report and your accounting. Planning is the future, accounting is the past. So I'm not saying necessarily, I'm not talking about tax reporting, but as you look at your business from a planning point of view, make sure that you are accounting for what you are worth.
Mm-hmm.
It's just visibility. It's seeing what's really there. And I'm amazed at how many people don't.
Right. That's good. Pay yourself first. So that point in and of itself, Tim, is helpful. The whole thing is helpful, but that one alone is helpful because so many people will just take the loss but not show it. Just because that's just the way it is when you're starting up. You can't pay yourself everything you want to get paid usually.
Well, and here's a tax one that because I don't want to confuse people, and taxes are so dangerous. You have to be very careful about paying yourself in your business plan and then what you report to the IRS, because you can't report it to the IRS unless you've actually written the check to yourself out of the company funds. But you can keep it visible in your business plan. So I don't mean to be giving tax advice here. Be very careful and check with your CPA about what you're reporting to the IRS. But yes, keep track of it.
And that is tax advice. Get a CPA.
Yeah, definitely, because that gets confusing. The year and a half that I didn't pay myself, I did keep track of what I was worth and accumulated it as debt to the company in case we ever had investors. And that was the right way to do it. And then when that debt was finally paid, there were wage, salary, IRS implications that had to be carefully done by the CPA and not by me.
Well, Tim, you have a great way of taking principles that can sometimes be quite complex and kind of breaking them down for the common small business owner like me to understand. I really appreciate that. Tim, do you have any words of wisdom that you can offer small business owners out there now dealing with some of these economic situations? It's very frustrating. It's very scary for a lot of people, but you've been in business for far longer than most of the listeners. What are your words of advice in terms of hanging in there?
Boy, the one you just have to mind, I like the term burn rate. Burn rate is how much you're spending every month. And without going, there's some formal financial definitions for like fixed costs and variable costs, but just think of burn rate. Know how much you write in checks every month. Mm-hmm. And compare that to your revenue rate and watch those two things like a steering wheel. And as soon as your revenue gets under your burn rate, mm-hmm. you're in big trouble.
You're in trouble, yeah.
Yeah. So if you can see the trend ahead of time, watch very carefully. We're in this very strange, very volatile time right now where we can't really make long-term predictions from short-term chaos. So it takes watching the burn rate versus the revenue very carefully and then not panicking, because you can cut the hell out of your burn rate by, for example, cutting costs that are going to come back and bite you, like some marketing. You have to have the sense of steering and recognizing that short-term chaos will settle down, and and you don't want to get killed, but you don't want to panic either.
Right.
It's hard. I mean, how do you give advice when it's all so specific to each person's business?
Yeah, well, you know what you said about keeping your eye even more closely on the burn rate versus the revenue rate, because there are probably ways, if you look and see that your burn rate is higher than it needs to be, there's probably some things you can do to cut it back. So
I had the experience in the recession of 2001. I sat and let 5 of 36 people go in the same morning. And I will say that it was a little bit easier to do because those 5 people didn't feel personal failure the way one person does when you let one person go. The context was, we have to cut costs, we're in trouble here, and we were. In 2001 we lost money, and it was a very hard time for us, and I look back on that now and realize that it was better to do the big thing at once than to eke it out one person at a time, because those 5 people, in small business, they're real people.
You made it through, Tim, and that's the thing that we indie business owners need to see and hear. You're a great example. For that reason and many others, I encourage you to pick up Tim's book, The Plan As You Go Business Plan. He's got other books as well, 3 Weeks to Start Up, and some other ones. And you can get all the information you need to touch base with Tim, get these books, read his blog, read some of his articles. He writes for the Washington Post. He's all over the place, connected with Guy Kawasaki out there in California as well. And we're just delighted to have you today. Visit timberry.com, right?
Yep. B-E-R-R-Y, not B-A-R-R-Y. Tim Berry, like Timothy Strawberry. timberry.com.
Right, like a delicious piece of fruit. That's good to remember. timberry.com, everyone. Check it out. It's worth your time. Well, I'm going to be looking forward to having more shows coming up for you. Of course, I'm planning lots of fun things here every Monday, 1 o'clock Eastern, right here on Indie Business Radio. And you can visit indiebusinessradio.com, and you can stream or download hundreds of shows that I've had with experts, interviews that help you build your business. I'll see you next week right here at Indie Business Radio. In the meantime, enjoy your life, build your business, and have your way.
You're listening to GlobalTalkRadio.com.